It's been revealed, sadly, that children as young as 12 years old are employed at Hyundai and Kia car plants in the United States. In my opinion, this just shouldn't be happening. 12 years old is just too young. This is the age when you should be at school, studying, learning, and dreaming about what your future will hold. Instead, the future of these children is being cut short in an alarming way. Hello, my friends. Welcome to the channel. I'm the Electric Viking. My name is Sam Evans and I'm coming to you from Melbourne in Australia. Thank you for tuning in and subscribing to the channel. Welcome to all the new subscribers. Great to see so many of you here, and welcome back everyone else. I have two boys. My youngest, his name's Cal, and he is 6, and he loves hugs from his mum and even from dad too, which is awesome. The older one, he's not so much of a hugger, but you know, he's kind of getting there. He loves his little brother. His name's Jack and he's 9. And I'm just thinking to myself, you know, I could see my boys, they've just started their own YouTube channel. They're doing that kind of stuff, but that's their own thing. They enjoy that. It's fun for them. I hope to make that into make them a bit of pocket money when they're a bit older in a few years' time. But frankly, imagining my oldest Jack, you know, only a few years working in a car plant doing manual labor. That's all right if he wants to do that when he's, say, 16, minimum, but 12 years old, and especially 12-year-old girls, wow. At least 4 suppliers that work basically directly for Hyundai Motor Company and Kia Corporation have employed child labor at Alabama factories recently, as recent as even this year, and it's been ongoing for a number of years. A Reuters investigation has just found, and state and federal agencies are probing whether kids have worked at as many as half a dozen additional manufacturers throughout the automaker's supply chain in the southern US state. At a plant owned by Hyundai America Corporation, a supplier of the 2 car brands, their main suppliers in the South Alabama town of Greenville, a 14-year-old Guatemalan girl worked this May assembling auto body components, according to interviews with her father and law enforcement officials. At plants owned by Korean auto parts maker Asian Industrial Company in the East Alabama town of Cusseta, with pretty close ties to Hyundai and Kia, a former production engineer told Reuters he worked with at least 10 minors, and 6 other ex-employees of Asian said they did too, working alongside multiple underage laborers on numerous occasions. In 2 separate statements sent by the same public relations firm, Huaxin and Aijin said their policies forbid the hiring of any worker not of legally employable age. Using identical language, both companies said they hadn't, to the best of our knowledge, hired underage workers. Well, unfortunately, they were very clearly lying. The employment of children at Huaxin and Aijin hasn't been previously reported. Apparently, so they say. The news, though, follows a Reuters report in July that revealed the use of child workers, one as young as 12 years old, a girl, by Smart Alabama LLC, a Hyundai subsidiary literally owned by Hyundai in the South Alabama town of Luverne. In August, the U.S. Department of Labor said that St. Alabama LLC, another Hyundai supplier and a unit of South Korea's SL Corp, employed underage workers, including a 13-year-old girl, at its factory in Alexander City. Now, the thing is, this is not working at McDonald's. This is not working at a reception desk. This is not doing some sort of, a thing that I think, we would think would be acceptable for, say, a 14, 15-year-old child. This is 12-year-old girls working in the production. Literally, we're talking labor-intensive jobs here. Since then, as many as 10 Alabama plants that supply parts to Hyundai and Kia have been investigated for child labor by various state and federal law enforcement or regulatory agencies, according to 2 people familiar with the actual ongoing probes that are happening right now. The investigations are being conducted across small towns and rural outposts where many of the suppliers and the job recruiters that staff them are located. It isn't yet clear whether the probes will lead to criminal charges, fines, or other penalties, the 2 people said. On August the 22nd, a team of Labor Department and Alabama state inspectors arrived unannounced at one of Asian's plants, according to people familiar with the operation. As the team arrived, workers rushed out the back and left the premises before they could be questioned. One of the inspectors told a meeting of Alabama's anti-human trafficking task force last month, according to two people who attended. Clearly, they've been trained that if any one official arrives, they must leave the factories immediately. This is really an institutionalized message coming down from the management working at these factories. Yes, we want to pay you because we can pay you very low wages. But if anyone official comes here, we don't even know who you are. You got to run. The inspection hasn't previously been reported. A Labor Department spokesman, Eric Lucero, told Reuters that the agency's wage and hour division has an open investigation into Ajin, but declined to confirm whether the probe was related to child labor. In its statement, Ajin said it will cooperate fully with any investigations by regulators and law enforcement as long as their staff have long enough to run away. Yeah, I'm joking, but I'm serious too. Hyundai, in a statement, told Reuters it does not condone or tolerate violations of labor law and requires that our suppliers and business partners strictly adhere to the law. Kia, for its part, said it strongly condemns any practice of child labor and does not tolerate any unlawful or unethical workplace practices internally or within our business partners and suppliers. Now, businesshumanrights.org reports that child laborers have been found in Hyundai factories with documented histories of health and safety violations. So this report actually is a bit more damning on Hyundai than it first looked. Hyundai and Kia, both South Korea's two largest automakers, are sister companies controlled by parent Hyundai Motor Group. Both companies told Reuters they are reviewing hiring practices used by their suppliers and their own practices as well, apparently. The discovery of child labor at additional plants in Hyundai's American supply chain could deal a fresh reputational blow to a company whose fast growth and popularity in recent years has led to become the third largest automaker by US sales. Now, although Hyundai and Kia do have two very impressive electric cars, the EV6 and the Ioniq 5, and of course, they plan to bring the Ioniq 6 as well at some point, they will have a big issue over the next few years. And that is, aside from dealing with this issue, is the fact that those cars are not manufactured in the United States, meaning they don't qualify anymore for the IRA or the $7,500 US tax incentives for vehicles built in the United States. Now, obviously, the Korean government is very angry about this. They believe this is unfair. They've said this is an illegal practice, and they say they intend to fight this ruling. The early reports of child labor drew law enforcement and regulatory scrutiny in the company's ability to meet its own professional ethical standards and comply with basic labor regulations in the United States. In-house human rights policies posted by both brands online prohibited child labor at Hyundai and Kia facilities and among their suppliers too. Alabama and US law restrict factory work for people under age 16, and all workers under 18 are forbidden from many hazardous jobs in auto plants where metal presses, cutting machines, and speeding forklifts can endanger life. And actually do. There's in fact quite a number of deaths I've reported on this channel that happen in auto plants. That's even for adults, for men in their 20s and 30s. After the early reporting by Reuters on child labor at suppliers Smart and SL, Hyundai COO Jose Muñoz told the news agency he ordered the carmaker's purchasing department to cease business with the suppliers named in the news reports as soon as possible, or as soon as is practicable, meaning whenever it suits the company. He also said the company would investigate all suppliers to Hyundai's Alabama operations. Hyundai, Muñoz added, would seek to end the use of third-party staffing agencies that many of its suppliers have relied upon to vet and hire workers. However, Hyundai itself is now backing away from Muñoz's remarks, saying, we're not sure we agree. We need those parts. If we don't have those parts, we can't make our cars. In its recent statements to Reuters, Hyundai said it has cancelled its plans to cut off suppliers where minors have worked. Two of its suppliers, Smart and SL, have taken corrective actions to fire staffing agencies they found problematic, it said. Noting the important economic role that parts makers play in many small Alabama towns, Hyundai added, additional oversight is a better course at this time than severing ties with these suppliers. Hyundai declined to make Muñoz available for a follow-up interview. They basically silenced him. The use of third-party staffing agencies is a common practice among manufacturers and other labor-intensive sectors throughout the US. The tactic has long been criticised by labour activists because it gives factory owners and other employers the ability to outsource responsibility for the screening, hiring and regulatory compliance of their workforces. Obviously, many of them are very well aware that illegal immigrants, people that shouldn't be working in their factories, often are. They just turn a blind eye to it. This is a pretty common practice. Now, the question I have for you guys now is, if this was Tesla, would this news story not be front page of, everywhere, right? All the major electric car websites, pretty much CNN, everyone would have this news story absolutely front page. But I can tell you right now, it's very hard to find this story. It hasn't been commonly reported. In fact, it hasn't been reported on by any single EV or so-called pretend EV, so-called clean energy website within the last few days. Nothing has been said at all. But if we're Tesla, well, we can guarantee it would have been reported on. I just think what's fair is fair. What's good for the goose is good for the gander. If we should look at one company in a certain way, we need to look at all companies in the same way. Do you think that's fair? Let me know your thoughts. Earlier this year, Reuters showed how staffing agencies in rural Alabama recruited undocumented workers from Central America, including minors who had entered the United States without parents or guardians, and supplied them to chicken processing plants. Not to be used as chicken feed, but, to work with the chickens in the factories. As with those minors, at least some of the children who worked at Hyundai suppliers used false identities, they say, and documentation obtained through black market brokers, sometimes with the help of staffing firms themselves. But I think it's pretty clear when you hire a 12-year-old girl that they're 12 years old. There's no way of really hiding that fact, is there? To understand how child labour took root in the supply chain in one of the world's most successful automakers, Automotive News says, and in the job market of the world's richest country, Reuters interviewed more than 100 current and former factory workers and managers, labour recruiters, state and federal officials, and others. Reporters spent weeks around auto parts factories in rural Alabama and reviewed thousands of pages of court records, corporate documents, police reports, and other records. It's shocking, David Well, a former administrator of the Wage and Hour Division of the Labour Department, said of the signs of widespread child factory work, the ages involved, the danger of what they are being employed to do. It's a very clear human rights violation. Across Alabama, a sprawling and partially interconnected network of suppliers and staffing agencies, many Korean-owned businesses existing only to serve Hyundai brands and Kia, and Hyundai operates an assembly plant in Montgomery, the state capital. Kia builds cars across the state line in West Point. Both states' so-called right-to-work jurisdictions, whose laws allow workers to reject unions and thereby undercut the power of organized labor, have attracted numerous automakers and follow-on investments as recently as this year, granting them billions of dollars in tax breaks and other incentives along the way. Basically, this is a way that they're able to save money. A key element of Hyundai's supply network is its ability to provide just-in-time delivery of parts, a staple of modern manufacturing meant to minimize the stockpile of materials, thereby cutting costs significantly. To avoid halting assembly lines, Hyundai can fine suppliers thousands of dollars per minute for any delay. According to people familiar with its operations, this does happen. Pressure to deliver, several current and former employees at suppliers told Reuters, intensified in recent years because of the labour and supply shortages that crippled manufacturers during the COVID-19 pandemic. The struggle to meet demand, labour law experts say, has increased chances that employers cut corners to keep assembly lines staffed, whether employees are legally allowed to work or not. It seems cutting corners is becoming routine for these companies in the United States. It seems like the stage was set for this to happen, said Terry Gerstein, director of the State and Local Enforcement Project at Harvard Law School's Labor and Work-Life program. Plants in remote rural areas, a region with low union density, not enough regulatory enforcement, use of staffing agencies, fines for slow supply of parts to Hyundai and Kia. The shortage of labour across manufacturing and the low pay offered by some plants and agents for factory jobs often attract job candidates most pressed for work, particularly undocumented migrants and minors. What you have, when you have workers who are desperate for jobs and they're not empowered and you have a lot of competition, you often see a race to the bottom, said Jordan Barab, a former Deputy Assistant Director at the Occupational Safety and Health Administration, the federal workplace regulator. So far, the manufacturer in the central Alabama town of Alexander City is the only Hyundai or Kia supplier charged with violating child labor laws. On August the 9th, state and federal labor and law enforcement officials found 7 workers between the ages of 12 and 16 on the factory floor, according to people familiar with the operation and government documents. The U.S. Labor Department, in a court filing, said SL Alabama had repeatedly violated the law by employing oppressive child labor. It fined the company about $30,000, which is nothing. Alabama's Department of Labor fined SL and one of its staffing agencies a total of $36,000. This is just a slap on the wrist. It's nowhere near enough to actually make them stop doing this. SL told Reuters in October it was cooperating with investigators and auditing its employment policies. The company said it had terminated the staffing agency fined by Alabama labor regulators and fired the president of SL's Alexander City plant. The plant's former president couldn't be reached for comment. Among the children found working at the plant, Reuters learned, were 2 Guatemalan brothers aged 12 and 15 who were taken into protective custody by federal authorities. While they worked at SL, the brothers lived without their parents, staying with other factory workers in a sparsely furnished house owned by the president of the staffing agency that hired them, according to property records, family members, and a former co-worker interviewed at the home in Alabama. A teenage cousin who worked at the factory with the brothers said that no one at SL ever verified or even asked for workers' ages. They didn't ask any questions at all, the cousin said. Reuters isn't naming the cousin and other minors and undocumented migrants interviewed for the story, but confirmed their identities and local employment history with authorities. Since Reuters' first report on child labor, in Hyundai's supply chain, staffing firms have fired foreign workers from at least 5 factories, current and former employees said, particularly any who appeared too young to legally work in the plants. The dismissals made it harder for authorities to investigate, officials said, because the employees may have been working under aliases and some moved away after being fired. Hyundai opened its massive Montgomery vehicle assembly plant in December of 2005. The Georgia Kia factory, 100 miles to the east, opened 5 years later. To support the 2 brands, many of Hyundai's suppliers from Korea set up in the area, building parts factories that revived local economies. Hyundai and Kia now have dozens of suppliers in Alabama, according to the Economic Development Partnership of Alabama, a business group. Authorities first caught wind of child labor among automotive suppliers in early 2021. I suspect Hyundai and Kia have known about this themselves for many years. A school official in Alabama's rural Butler County told state officials that some children, including at least one immigrant girl that was no more than 12 years old, appeared to be working at Huashin, the parts maker in Greenville. The manufacturer, which builds metallic body parts in a factory the size of 4 football fields, is now the biggest employer in a town once better known for cotton farming. After the tip, officials familiar with the matter told Reuters they began examining Huashin. The tipster and the officials spoke on condition they not be identified by name or by agency. Even as authorities were investigating, a 14-year-old migrant was recruited to the factory floor. The girl's father said he and his daughter arrived in Alabama 4 years earlier after a long trek from Guatemala. The teen looks younger than her age. On a visit to their home, a small house shared with other migrants south of Greenville, Reuters met the girl, who is just over 4 feet tall, with rosy cheeks and a timid smile. Now, to be fair here, the reality is she could be 9 years old. There's no way of us really knowing. We have to take the father's word for it. Early this year, the father had been working poultry jobs. Troubled by the family's meager income and hoping to send money back to family in Central America, the girl, who wasn't attending school, asked her father if she too could get a job. He claims, apparently. He agreed. I wish I had said no, he said. In April, the father turned to a Spanish-speaking recruiter who was regularly seeking labourers. The recruiter, the father said, worked for a company he knew as JSS, a name familiar in the area as a staffing agency for Hyundai suppliers. As with many staffing firms, the ownership structure of JSS isn't entirely clear in public records. A review of more than 24 labour brokers found a complex web of overlapping companies that form and dissolve quickly to serve only Hyundai. 2 other people, speaking on condition of anonymity, told Reuters they had worked as recruiters for JSS. The agencies, they said, hired underage workers while they worked there. Those former recruiters gave Reuters an address in the state capital and said that JSS's top executive, Jay Kim, often worked there. In October, Reuters visited the office, located in a Montgomery strip mall. Inside, paperwork and logos for various agencies, including JSS staffing, lay on desks. Javier Martinez, an employee, confirmed in a brief interview that the office is run by a businessman named Jay Kim. He said Jay wasn't in that day. Convenient. On LinkedIn, Jay Kim is listed as CEO of a staffing firm called Advanced Job Solutions LLC, or AJS. Kim didn't respond to requests for an interview. He's apparently in hiding. In Greenville, 3 miles from the Huaxin factory, a storefront for JSS staffing advertised jobs this month in a big window display in Spanish and in English. Estamos contratando. The sign reads, now hiring. A property manager for the site said the office is rented to a company known as Job Supply System LLC. In a phone call to the Greenville office, an attendant referred Reuters back to Martinez, the employee at Kim's office in Montgomery. Now, the story actually gets worse when you find out what they're getting paid per hour. When the Guatemalan girl's father contacted the recruiter, he said he asked whether his daughter's age would be an issue. No, the recruiter told him. On the black market, the girl's father procured a fake ID seen by Reuters that says she is an 18-year-old California resident who is 4 foot tall and looks like she's 10 years old. The name and picture on the card are the daughter's, but the birth year, of course, is fake. By May, the father said he and his daughter were both working at Huaxin, each earning $11 per hour. That's higher than the federal minimum wage of $7.25. Alabama doesn't impose the state minimum, but the rate is well below what many other industrial jobs in the region pay, including poultry processors, where workers earn around $14 per hour. Father and daughter worked long shifts, commuting 90 minutes each way from their home. The cost of van rides deducted from their weekly pay, the father said. Many staffing agencies operate van fleets and provide transportation to companies for which they recruit labor, generally illegal immigrant labor. Shortly after father and daughter started, word circulated among factory workers that authorities were planning a crackdown on migrant child labor. It isn't clear what prompted the rumors, but months earlier, another young girl from Guatemala who worked at Smart, the Hyundai-owned supplier in nearby Luverne, disappeared briefly with an adult co-worker. That girl's case was detailed in Reuters' first report about child labor among Hyundai's actual suppliers, many of which Hyundai owned themselves. By late May, the father said his daughter and other minors working at Huaxin were abruptly fired by the staffing agency. "You've got to leave," he said, the recruiter told his daughter and other dismissed minors. "The authorities will be arriving here soon." The father said he also left Huaxin by early June. At that time, investigators hadn't appeared. Reuters couldn't determine whether authorities have visited the plant since. Huaxin said it wasn't aware of any probe of its labor practices and that it would cooperate with any investigation. Adult factory workers in Hyundai's Alabama supply chain told Reuters they knew or suspected that children worked alongside them, but feared raising the issue would cost them their jobs. Paul Roa, a 27-year-old production engineer from Mexico, had arrived in 2020 at the East Alabama town of Cusita to work at Ajin, one of the 2 metal stamping plants owned by Korean parent company of the same name. Roa said Ajin working recruitment firm secured him a visa. The visa, a type of entry permit authorized by a trade agreement with Mexico and Canada, allows highly skilled professionals from those countries to work in the US. Roa was among many Mexican professionals recruited by Hyundai suppliers in recent years, according to interviews, court records, and company documents reviewed by Reuters. Shortly after his arrival, Roa said he began noticing a significant increase in the numbers of migrant workers recruited. Among them, he suspected, were minors. With time, he got to know some of the younger ones. At least 10 told him they were underage. He said most of them were between 14 to 16 years old. I was very surprised, said Roa, who left Arjun earlier this year for a job outside the automotive industry. It was my first job in the United States, and this is not what you would expect to see here. 6 other former workers told Reuters that they too saw underage workers at Arjun's 2 factories in Cusick. All 6 spoke on condition they not be identified. One of the 6 former workers, an American manager at one of Arjun's plants, told Reuters he did alert superiors last year to the presence of workers who looked well underage. A boss at the plant, he said, dismissed his concerns and advised him to focus on production and keep his mouth shut. Reuters was unable to reach the superior, and Arjun declined to comment on the manager's assertion that a superior had ignored his concerns and potentially that of others. However, Carlos Herrera, a 29-year-old production engineer, said he heard a similar message. Like Roa, Herrera said he had been recruited by Smart directly from Mexico with a visa. After starting at Smart in October 2020, Herrera said he noticed at least 20 young boys and young girls working at the plant, many of them from Guatemala. He said some of the minors told him they were between the ages of 12 and 15, possibly even younger. They worked under fake names, Herrera said, and did the same jobs as adults, some of them driving forklifts and operating welding equipment, doing very physical jobs. In January, Herrera said, he saw a 16-year-old forklift driver sprain his hand after falling. Another teen, he said, also fell around that time and injured his elbow. Herrera said he raised concerns about the underage workers with managers at Smart but was brushed off. I would tell them that person shouldn't be working, he said, but they just didn't care. Smart, in a statement provided by the same public relations firm hired by the other parts makers, said it cut ties with a staffing agency that supplied it with one underage worker. It said it was unaware of any evidence that any other firm had supplied an employee who was not of legally employable age. I frankly find this astonishing that they continue to lie. It's obvious that this is an institutionalized practice at these companies, and clearly Hyundai and Kia would have been aware that this was happening. Smart didn't respond to questions about the injuries Herrera saw. Smart actually makes interior components for popular Hyundai models, including the Santa Fe and the Elantra, and is majority owned by Hyundai themselves. Basically, that means Hyundai has been employing possibly more than 50 children as young as age 12 to build your Hyundai Santa Fe and Elantra cars that you're driving around in the United States right now. In my opinion, that is absolutely unacceptable. And in fact, I'm actually angry. I'm outraged that this has even happened. Here's the thing. Herrera said on several occasions he saw personnel from Hyundai visit the plant, and they definitely would have seen the existence of these 12-year-olds walking around on the factory floor. Other former Smart employees also told Reuters Hyundai officials regularly visited the factory. The officials wearing shirts that bore Hyundai logos inspected the assembly line even as underage workers labored there, Herrera said. I don't know if they were paying attention to people's faces, he said, but it was obvious there was minors who were way underage. Hyundai, for their part, have not responded to any questions about the company's visits or whether its officials saw underage workers there. In addition, the workers at the factory allege Smart and its staffing agencies recruited them to come from abroad to work as engineers, but instead when they arrived there, assigned them to rote assembly work at the factory, knowing that they had the right to actually revoke their visas. And in fact, these staff are taking the company to court for misleading them and making them move a long way away from home in order to accept roles which they clearly were not meant to be doing. After Reuters documented the disappearance of the young girl who worked at Smart, a team of state and federal authorities conducted the August 9th inspection at SL in Alexander City. They discovered 7 minors there, including the 2 Guatemalan brothers, among employees making lights and mirrors for Hyundai and Kia. Alabama's Department of Labor fined SL and JK USA Inc., a staffing agency, $17,000 each. A state penalty letter against JK is addressed to a top executive of the staffing agency, Sam Hong, president, Alabama property records show the house where the two brothers lived with the other SL workers is owned by a company registered in Sam Hong's name. Among the issues state and federal investigators are now looking into and probing is whether children who worked among Hyundai's suppliers and for businesses owned by Hyundai may have gotten there through human trafficking networks. 3 people familiar with the investigation said, "Minor is part of a child labor trafficking case." Read notes reviewed by Reuters from one of the brothers' case files. In the notes, authorities wrote the children described exploitation from debt bondage of repaying smuggling debts being the reason they were working at Hyundai's factories in the first place. They added that an unnamed third-party labor service company made the youths believe it could have them removed from the US and sent back home, or even sent to jail if they didn't pay off their debts. Some children express fear of deportation based on comments made by company officials to them, the notes said. Like I said, I'm pretty angry about this. Personally, I was actually seriously looking at buying a Hyundai Ioniq 5. I've decided I'm not going to do that as a result of this investigation. If it changes, if something comes out and where there is some proof that Hyundai didn't know about this, which I highly doubt will happen, I'll change my mind. If it doesn't, I'm sticking to it. Let me know your thoughts in the comment section below. Thank you for watching.